Today is March 26th, and we're in week 3 of lockdown for many of us. So Mike Heffley was nice enough. They have done literally a couple hundred schools on Teams and remote learning. They've spoken before. So Mike, I'll give it to you to introduce yourself and take it away.
Thank you, David. So my name is Michael Heffley, partner at a company called Business Technology Professionals. We focus on education, K through 12 and higher ed. As David mentioned, we've worked with hundreds of districts and universities in deploying the Microsoft cloud technologies, everything from Office 365, EM+S, and Azure to now Microsoft 365 in a unified package. Most recently, over the past year, we've really been trying to hit on Microsoft Teams for remote learning and work from home scenarios. And as David mentioned, we're 3 weeks into a very accelerated effort to talk about using your time efficiently. We were working with a large district in Pennsylvania, approximately 25,000 students, 4,000 faculty and staff. We were working on a project around SCCM at the beginning of the week, and we said, hey, could we have an introduction to your chief academic officer? We'd like to talk about Teams and remote learning. And the head of IT said, you know what, that's great. I've been pushing that noodle uphill for a year and got nowhere. Well, it turns out he comes back in an hour and says, can you have a meeting with her later this week? And he comes back an hour later from that and says, we'd like to meet tomorrow. And so literally we are on a 14-day project. It's quite coincidental, David, that you mentioned 14 days. We're on a 14-day project to turn them into a remote learning center for K through 12 for those 25,000 students, training all faculty, staff, and students, preparing video for parents and families so they understand what the experience is like. And we're engaging with the superintendent and principals to make sure that the message comes from the top down. So that's kind of who we are, and we are kind of an agile organization. I have presented before, but in fact, we have a Teams guru on staff, a gentleman by the name of Chris Watson, and he leads our Teams practice, everything from the technology backend and configuration of school data sync to the actual use of Teams in the classroom and some of the educational changes that need to happen for educators who are previously teaching face-to-face and now teaching remotely and sometimes asynchronously. And for some of these urban districts, how do you deal with the disparity of access, both to computer technology when you don't have a one-to-one initiative, as well as ISP access, which might be lacking. And in the shutdown period, even in Philadelphia, we've got a free library system that's got 1,000 machines for students to use, but they can't get out of their house to go use them. So with that, let me turn it over to Chris Watson and let him present a little bit on policy, best practices, how we roll out Teams, and kind of what some of the things that you want to think about from a governance or policy perspective, and some of the ways that we are making it more accessible to people who might not otherwise be able to participate in remote learning. Chris?
Hi guys, thanks so much for tuning in today. I'm glad to be here with all of you. Hopefully you guys can see me okay. I'm actually going to go ahead and share my screen. And we'll get started. I just want to talk a lot about policy today. A lot of things that we're seeing now is that people are actually trying to roll out Teams, and they are not, hold on one second here, guys, sorry. They're not doing it the right way, as I would want to say. Best practice, we want to make sure that we lock down your environment first to all users who are going to be logging into it to ensure that you guys have the, interesting. Sorry, guys, I'm experiencing difficulties on my end. Of course, the demo gods are not working in our favor today, but we will press forward. So one thing we want to pay attention to when we're rolling this out is that we properly review the permissions within our environment and make sure that we're giving students the permissions that they should have, teachers the permissions that they should have, and then looking at how we can leverage that in our environment and then make adjustments as needed. So my apologies if you'll give me 1 second. I'm going to try to
While Chris is fighting with his demo technology. And by the way, one thing that I know this is the Microsoft Teams office hours, but what we see deployed concurrently very frequently is Windows Virtual Desktop. So if it's a K through 12 environment, perhaps seniors or juniors are working on tech labs with AutoCAD or SolidWorks. And in higher ed, we frequently see machines that have licensed applications, whether it's SSPS or other that are very expensive and are running on $5,000 pieces of hardware. And if students can't get to those, what we frequently see is, as Teams is rolled out for the remote learning piece, the remote lab piece can be supported with Windows Virtual Desktop in Azure. So topic for another day, but feel free to hit up David Perlman if you'd like to talk with us. We'd be happy to spend some time. In fact, Chris's demo environment right here that he's showing you is actually running in Windows Virtual Desktop. Chris, you good?
All set now. Thanks, guys. Sorry for.
Please post your questions. We're happy to respond in real time to anything we don't cover, and if we can't answer it for you in this 25 minutes, we'll be happy to take it as homework and get back to you.
Just a heads up, guys, please do interrupt me. I am part of the set of users who are experiencing the known issue and are not able to see the chats that are coming in. So I'm flying blind over here. So please, guys, just pop in and give me a heads up because I have no way to see what's going on. So I'm just going to keep going until you tell me to stop.
I'll just let you guys know that that's a known issue, that you can't see the chat, and that's not something we'll be able to resolve. So just continue without that. And if there are questions, we'll interrupt you and ask them.
Yep, exactly. That's all I ask. So one thing I want to do is let's take a look. If you actually are an administrator within your environment, which I assume most of the people on this call are going to be, we're all familiar to go to portal.office.com, go to the admin center, and walk our way through into the Teams admin portal. One of the things I really want to take a look at is this cool thing called policy packages. And this is something Microsoft came out with a few months ago now, and a lot of people aren't actually using it. And Microsoft has pre-built packages for your environment. So whether you're a higher ed institution, primary school, secondary school, or a teacher, they've actually built these policy packages for you. And this is going to be a one-time assignment that you can run within your organization. And it assigns all of these policies. So let's take a look at this education teacher environment. So this is a package that you can assign to a group of users who would be your teachers within your environment. But we look here, instead of having to create individual policies and trying to research what the best practice is going to be for messaging, for meeting, for apps and calling and live events, Microsoft has already actually done that for you. So we go through and they've made these messaging policies for you. And you can see here, so they don't allow users to delete messages, owners to delete messages. Do we allow people to edit the messages after they sent? So these are policy packages that we want to take a look at, and you may be able to leverage these within your organization. It's up to you. You can also make your own custom policy packages and put those together. Another cool feature we can do is we can actually go ahead and dynamically assign using PowerShell role packages as well. So as people get added and removed from your environment, you don't have to keep doing these policy package deployments. And I heard I got a message. Was that me that I heard get a message, or was it somebody else?
We'll call out questions. You keep going. If there's questions, we'll interrupt you. Don't worry.
Okay, perfect. So then we're going to go through, and you want to look at other things within your environment. One of the things I like to look at is going to be under the, I believe it's play along with me here, guys. So one of the things I want to look at, there's a quality of QoS setting, quality of service setting that we like to adjust. Microsoft by default has it turned off, and I like to turn it on, especially as we're working from home. A lot of these people who are dialing in some of their modems at home may have access to quality of service and do tagging around that. And so I like to turn that on, and of course, it is not where I thought it was anymore. I will send some documentation on that afterwards, but quality of service and also allowing teams to use any port. So by default, Microsoft specifies a set of ports that Microsoft Teams can use within your environment. Now we see people may have issues with that if they're working from home or if they're using public Wi-Fi because certain ports may be blocked. So one of the cool things we want to do is go ahead and tell teams you are allowed to use any available port that you can find to have these communications as necessary. Another thing we want to do is make sure that we have one of the questions that I kind of heard and didn't hear was about assigning users and giving them licenses. One of the cool things we can use is School Data Sync. It's a relatively lightweight lift. I'm not sure how many people on this call are using it, but this is a great way to go through and have Microsoft build out for you your entire Teams environment. And that way we don't have to actually do anything. And we can even have School Data Sync go ahead and assign our licenses for us. So if we decide, okay, this set of users is going to need this set of users is going to need this, we train School Data Sync to do that, and it can apply that for us. Some of the other cool stuff we can do is we look at the assignment section, but staff collaboration is a really great feature that Teams specializes in that we don't see used as much within a lot of environments that I'm working in. So one of the cool things that I built was actually this emergency response team. And then from here, I actually used Planner. And we went ahead and we said, okay, within this channel, we've got this take action section. So I used Planner, Power Automate, and a couple other backend features. And so let's say there's an issue within your district, or you guys want to have some response plans going in place. So one that we were building up before everybody was shut down. This was a little bit ago. You can see this COVID-19 emergency response plan. So had something happen within this district, a whole bunch of things need to happen to close down the school, send out communication. And that's a lot of disparate information that has to come together, and somebody has to keep track of that, or a team has to come together and manage that. So we look at things like Power Automate to go through and manage that for us, give tasks to people, send updates, and manage that entire environment. So one of the cool things we did was I built this flow, and I added this take action section, and this is just a name that I gave to this. And basically all it said was like, yes, I want to close school, and I gave it a question. So this is going to be, go ahead and run the flow. So this actually goes through, it sends the person who started the flow a notification. It sends the entire faculty, staff, students, everybody in the district a text message. It goes ahead and posts within our planner for the building and grounds people to remind them to, turn the boilers off, do all of the stuff that each department would be responsible for. And for us to keep track of that within this emergency response planner. So you can see it assigns somebody a task. They can go ahead and update that as needed. And that allows the entire district to have that one place where we can look, okay, here's the tasks that are still outstanding, here's in progress, here's completed. That's one of the things that I see a lot of people don't realize is that you can integrate Power Automate and Teams and a whole bunch of other Office 365 applications together. You could even use Power Automate if you guys are using Office 365 ATP or Windows Defender ATP to build runbooks on the back end. Do we have any questions so far? I really want to make sure that if you guys have any Office 365 or Teams admin questions, that I can answer those for you. I mean, this could be easy.
This is Sean from Des Moines Area Community College in Iowa. I got a question about the package policies.
Mm-hmm.
So we noticed this a couple of weeks ago. I don't know if this has changed or not, but when you go into the messaging policies and you maybe like click on one of the education ones that are pre-created,
mm-hmm.
when you go to assign users, you can only assign users. You can't use groups.
Let me double check. That should have been able to be done via groups. One thing we can do is I'll send over some documentation on how to do that via PowerShell, and you can teach PowerShell to do it for you, and that'll actually become dynamic.
Okay, that would be great. So like right now, when we type in there, it's only allows us to put in users. You can't put in groups.
They were supposed to unlock it to groups. They may not have yet in the way that.
Like if you go up to messaging policies on the left.
Just not the package, the policy itself.
Oh, the actual policy itself, like this one.
That's it, yeah, right there.
Okay, so this is a little different. So if you want to start building those packages out and then assign them to security groups, they haven't released it for the GUI yet. So for the graphical user interface, we can only assign those via PowerShell. And so I'll try to find the documentation around that and send that over. Policy packages are a little different. So a policy package is a package of all of these other sub policies put together into one.
Right.
So that's only available via PowerShell in this moment. And I'm sure now with all the things happening on the engineering team with this outbreak and the mass use and how we've had to scale up teams, it's probably going to be a little bit before it actually makes it to full GA for the graphical interface.
Oh, that's fine. I'm perfectly happy with doing it with PowerShell. I just hadn't have to do that.
Yep. Yeah. Let me look up the documentation on that, and I'll see if I can find it and send it over to you guys.
I think it builds on what used to be for SharePoint. It was the PNP PowerShell.
So there's also
Chris,
another question.
Go ahead.
Sorry. So let's leave some of the questions. We'll stay a little bit longer at the end, but I'd like you to get through this so that the vast majority of people can see this. And I know, so why don't we continue on, then we'll come back to some of the questions. Don has a question. There's a few others. So why don't we keep going?
Okay. Yeah. I'm sorry. I had planned for this to be a little more Q&A.
Okay. That's fine. We can keep going then.
Some of the things that one thing I would share is specifically for remote learning use cases is it's not the insert background capability is not GA yet, and we don't know exactly what the settings will be when it goes GA. But especially if you're in K through 12, be wary of your policy for video for meeting participants. We've had a couple of schools that have reported incidents of inappropriate background images on students' machines that were not blurred. I'll leave it at that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was a fun one.
Fair enough. So okay, so it sounds like we have a question. We have the default app setup policy that allow users app pinning, but after 15 minutes it gets reset saying an admin has changed your policy. Are there other settings that could revert the pinned apps?
On the left-hand side, to allow the users to go ahead and pin apps.
So it sounds like they when they're setting up a policy that allows a user to do app pinning, it sounds like it's reverting back to the previous state. Is there another policy somewhere that would change change with the default apps that are appearing? So it sounds like, is there another policy that's in conflict, right? So a policy on a tenant versus a policy at the channel level, maybe, or the team level?
So that is a team setting. And sorry, off the top of my head, I don't remember exactly where that is within the admin center. So you'll have to give me a second to find it, but you can actually control where that is actually going to be.
We can put that one on the parking lot and we can come back to it too.
So if you go to, in the Teams admin center, we go to Teams app setup policies, and this is going to be where you can go ahead and add apps to that left rail, that app picker, and then pin those. And then this allow user pinning. So we want to make sure that this setting is turned on. So this is in the Microsoft Teams admin center, and then it's under the tab for Teams apps and then setup policies.
So this is Dawn, just to comment on it. We do have that option set, and we actually only had one setup policy, and we still get the admin user setting has been changed, so the user can't pin their own things. So we can create additional policy for them, but we wanted to figure out, are we misunderstanding what that app pinning actually means? Does it allow custom pinning or some other feature?
It sounds like you're having an actual issue with Teams.
Okay.
Perhaps open a support. If you're changing the global org-wide default and those users fall within the global org-wide default or whatever group that they're in, then that should be your experience. You shouldn't be having issues. So if they are having issues, I would make sure that that user has that policy assigned to them. And then from there, if you're still experiencing issues, I would open a ticket.
Okay, yeah, I did, and I see somebody else said that they're currently being rolled out, so that's probably our issue too. Thanks.
Any other questions within the team?
Nope, keep going if there's other stuff that you think's worth kind of highlighting.
One of the cool things a lot of people can do are, I don't know, it sounds like we've got some developers on this, which is super awesome. So Teams now allows you to load in third-party applications that you've home built. So you can actually go in and you can download what's called the App Studio within the App Store. So if you go to apps here and then you search for App Studio, you can actually build applications to put within Teams. So you'll actually see we've got a very light web app that was built in for here. And we loaded this into Teams via the Office 365 admin portal. And we sent this out to all the users within our organization. And this is just this page here publishes a web page. This was actually just a light app that was designed to show people how to use Office 365 in Teams when we were deploying it. So this was thrown out here. You can throw surveys in here, a what's new section. And that's a feature that we don't see a lot of schools leveraging, but it is actually pretty powerful, is to be able to put homegrown custom applications in Teams and then pin them to this left app bar. I'm not sure if anybody has used that yet.
Great.
Any other
questions?
Some of the common?
I have a question for you. What are some of the common third-party apps that you've seen people do custom integrations with?
I haven't seen the issues. I haven't seen much done. Some of the stuff is like homegrown applications. So to integrate your organization's website or a learning management system for attendance, so we can actually work with different student information systems and see how they publish their web page. And then we take that, we build that into the web app, pin it to the left-hand side. So that allows teachers to actually go ahead and take their attendance right from within Teams. So a little less distance learning and more in the classroom. Or even if you're using Blackboard or other tools, instead of having them loaded for each team where you would traditionally on the top, we would have to have them in Teams and then put them as these tabs. We can actually go ahead and we could just build a web app for Blackboard right within Teams.
Awesome. We had another question, Chris. The question was, I think from, I'm not sure if it's Nick Smith, N. Smith. Can SDS assign a Teams meeting policy to students?
I would actually not use School Data Sync to do that. I would have the PowerShell script do that for us. So we have the PowerShell script that's running and dynamically assigning the Teams policies based on security groups. So I would interrogate the security group that the students are going to be in and then use that.
Thank you. That's the only question that I see in the chat pane at the moment. So if there's a few other items that you want to hit on.
Yeah, well, I've got one. We're working with a number of K through 12 districts now that are working on curriculum development, and one very large one that's working on creating a remote learning center of excellence, if you will. And those are really two use cases for Teams that we found very helpful. It's not directly learning in the classroom per se, but it is around education. And so we've got a district I'm working with today, in fact, was deploying a single team for curriculum development and then segmenting by channel for individual grades and topics so that the teachers could be invited to this private team. Students would never see it. And then within that team, the channels were not made private so that they could pick and choose which topics and which grade levels were relevant to them. So that's another use case that we just wanted to throw out there.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't use that. So within Teams, you can actually go ahead and create these private teams, or I'm sorry, private channels. So a team can be either public or private, and that allows people within your organization to either leave or join based on if it's, so it's, let me take that a step back and actually explain what I mean here. So you can have a public team, as I'm sure you guys are all familiar, where people can leave or join, and it's published to the entire organization. And then you can create a private team where people are invited into that team based on a dynamic query that you can use in Office 365 Azure, or we can just manually add people. Because if we peel the layer back of Teams, it's an Office 365 group. So you can actually use the dynamic query feature in Azure AD to add and remove students or faculty, staff members, whomever, based on AD attributes very easily. So that's a really great feature, especially if you're trying to deploy Teams and make it rather seamless. Instead of having to manually add people and then somebody has to be responsible for adding new team members and removing other team members, let the dynamic query do it for you. Please note that that does take a little while. So it could take up to 24 hours, if I remember correctly, for somebody to be added or removed based on the query, especially if they're a new user. So we have let's say a private team where people are within this team, and a team is a collection of people working to achieve a greater good or purpose. But we have channels, which are these more threaded conversations. Let's say I have a bunch of people together, but then a smaller subset of those users actually have to do some work privately, and we don't want to have to create an entire new private team for them because they're already together in perhaps a cross-functional group. Instead of creating a new team, we leverage the private channel. And this is almost like, it basically creates a locked channel within the team where only people who are invited into it can see it. So if you have a locked icon next to it, that means somebody, one of the owners of the teams, created a private channel and invited you into that. And that experience is rather easy to do. So all you do is, if you are an owner of a team, you just do add channel, you name the channel. If I could type today, that would be even better. And then you just set the access to private. And as you go through the steps, Teams is going to say, okay, great, super cool. Now, who do you want to have in this team? And then you would tell it, okay, I want these people. And so I could say, let's say I want Michael Heffley within this team, and I want Brian Regan. Now I've created a private team with only these 2 members, and now we can all work privately together because we were already in a team together instead of creating an entirely new team. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So it's a great feature, especially when you have a cross-functional group that needs to work together and they're already in an overarching team. Instead of having more teams being created, leverage the private channel feature. That's a great way to get, instead of having to have like 72 new teams spun up, people to work together. That was a big ask and they finally released it. So leverage that at all costs. One thing that to be aware of, if you create a private team, you can't put a planner into it, or some of the additional features of teams that other things plug into. It just doesn't work yet. I know it's 5 o'clock. Do we have any other questions? Also, after this, please reach out to David Perlman or myself. If he can also forward questions to me, I'm available to help you guys answer any questions you may have.
Hey Chris, this is Sean. I have a question again. Like everybody else, COVID-19 has drastically accelerated our adoption rate of teams. One of the biggest things that we're struggling with is access control. Right now, you currently can't dynamically control access to the team with an Active Directory group. And if you use an Active Directory group, it just expands at one time, puts those users in there. If that group membership changes, it doesn't update it.
Can we double click on that a little bit and expand what you're talking about? An Active Directory group, are you talking a security group?
Yes.
Okay.
So you can
groups,
have a dynamic Office 365 group, but the
Which
queries that populate those are only based off user properties.
correct.
So we got many people that are members of maybe 20 or more teams, and so there's not even that many attributes available for on a user account to be able to dynamically spread them across some groups.
Yeah. So if you're trying, so it would depend on so you want to use dynamic queries if it's a set team that isn't going to change, and then you try to find attributes that are going to work to fit that. If not, then you're kind of stuck having to manually add or remove people, because security groups do not dynamically change. You can only add from a security group once, unfortunately. Okay. If you're talking, what kind of teams are you trying to create would be a better question.
Well, for instance, a team for we don't have school data sync, and it would probably be very hectic for us to try to do it right now with all the craziness going on. But we do have a lot of instructors that want their class, a team as a class. So
so for that, you would use dynamic queries. You would just manually add the students in, because that's how school data sync was designed to solve that problem.